Good morning. Uh, this topic is going to be about physical performance in hot environment. When the mercury rises in sweltering day, even the easy exercise becomes huge physical undertaking, while the intense one can be fatal. If the body's temperature regulation system is overtaxed, the performer is going to be at risk of developing heat-related stress. To know how strong the performance could get worse in a hot, humid environment, we can give an example here from the history of FIFA World Cup. Knowing that the average summer temperatures in England each year is around 17 degrees Celsius compared to 28 degrees Celsius in Italy's summer months, it's not surprising that in the sporting world at the 2014 FIFA World Cup, where England played in various cities throughout Brazil, they have lost 2-1 against Italy in the hot and humid temperatures of Manaus. It was predicted that temperature would be around 32 degrees Celsius with the humidity reaching up to 80% for the match, which could have been a factor linked to the final score of the game. And it was a reason why England's possession was only 44% compared to 56% for Italy. And just to make matters worse, England played with Uruguay in Sao Paulo with a loss 1-2 or 1-4-2, followed by Costa Rica with temperatures predicted to reach above 30 degrees Celsius over the next 2 weeks, but fortunately with equal score 0-0. Having to deal with very high temperatures and a high humid environment may lead to stumbling players not being quiet on the ball, literally and metaphorically. The effects of playing football in hot compared with playing in colder environments can reveal many disconcerting results among those who were performing under hot, humid conditions, such as, for example, swift mounting of core temperatures of about more than 39 degrees Celsius, with running less distances at high intensity running speeds, with sweating 1 liter per hour more in hot games, resulting in 2% loss on body mass. Excitingly, under such conditions, a greater number of successful passes may be recorded with greater time in possession of the ball and less contact challenges in the hot games. Actually, this is suggesting that players in hot humid conditions may choose to play the game at a slower pace when they perform high intensity actions, so their sprinting speed was maintained. As another example, to figure out the hindering effect of the hot humid environmental conditions on aerobic performances, holding marathon in inconvenient venues where the heat stress could be a burden for the marathoner who get exhausted earlier compared with those who run in more average temperatures, for example, could be up to 40 minutes or even more earlier in hot environments compared with the average temperature, for example, 10 to 11 degrees Celsius, with the progressive slowing of marathon performance and dramatic changes of race position and overall completion time. Another example in cycling, power output was 6.5% lower and blood lactate was significantly higher in elite road cyclists when performed in hot temperatures compared to colder temperatures, which can have an unfavorable effect on muscle contraction. Definitely, the faster and harder the person rides in hot weather, the harder on his body it's going to be. Obviously, such riding cannot be avoided in a race, but if it is out in the country on an all-day ride, one must keep the pace steady and try to keep the energy expenditure low. Now, to figure out how strong could be the effect of performing in hot, humid environments, we have to know that hot and humid environment is a place where environmental factors significantly increase the body temperature to uncomfortable or even dangerous levels. Heat production is directly proportional to exercise intensity. So, extremely strenuous exercise, even in cold environment, can cause a substantial rise in body temperature. This is unlikely to occur in individuals who exercise at a slower pace but are common in the faster, highly motivated athletes who are able to produce more power and thus more heat. Sweat, which usually cools the body by dissipating excessive heat, doesn't evaporate faster in the heat and humidity. As a result, body temperature rises more quickly, which in turn can pose a serious threat to the health of the athletes if not properly managed. Hyperventilation with hypocapnia, alkalosis, tachycardia, and probability of arrhythmias, along with the rise of blood pressure, all could impair the cardiorespiratory functions during performance that accordingly affect the process of heat dissipation with building up of core temperature. Also, alteration in brain metabolism with alteration in neurotransmitters levels can occur as a result of excessive exposure to heat with the need of peripheral vasodilatation. A compensatory vasoconstriction may happen in many organs not participating in the competition, for example, like the brain. This definitely will decrease the blood flow and oxygen supply to the brain, potentially leading to a fainting episode. At very high temperature, the blood-brain barrier begins to break down, and so unwanted or dangerous even proteins and ions can build up in the brain, causing inflammation and messing up normal functioning of the brain. Concerning fatigue in sweltering days, high body temperature per se can cause fatigue in trained subjects during prolonged exercise in uncompensable hot environments. Furthermore, time to exhaustion in hot environments in trained subjects, even in trained subjects, is inversely related to the initial level of body temperature and directly related to the rate of heat storage. It was thought that when body temperature rises to about 39.5 degrees Celsius, central fatigue would happen or would develop. Central here means fatigue in the brain rather than in the working muscles. It was seen as a protective mechanism to prevent overheating, but no negative effects of mild mental fatigue were observed on performance and the physiological and perceptual responses to endurance exercise in the heat. Most plausibly, mild mental fatigue doesn't reduce endurance performance when the brain is already stressed by a hot environment. So, the disconcerting predisposing factor in fatigue here is almost physical factor in the working muscles. Exhaustive exercise in a hot environment can impair performance due to higher epinephrine plasma levels, indicating greater sympathetic activity. Finally, heat stress can occur as a result of all the issues mentioned before. To understand finally, the heat stress from the environment can be detrimental to sporting performance, challenging the limits of the human. First of all, the cardiovascular system. During heat stress, preload and afterload decrease while inotropy increases to maintain or increase the stroke volume. So, on a sweltering hot day, the cardiovascular system ramps up its efforts to radiate heat to cool down. Through a direct effect of local heat on the sinoatrial node in combination with withdrawal of parasympathetic neural activity, coupled with increase in cardiac sympathetic neural activity, the heart beats faster and pumps harder and may circulate 2 to 4 times as much blood each minute as it does on a cool day. So, the combined stroke volume and heart rate responses result in large increase in cardiac output, with increasing the peripheral blood flow, as we discussed before, during the heat stress to uphold the heat dissipation process. But when temperature soar, perspiring can put a strain on the cardiovascular system, so exercise in the heat can pose a severe challenge to human cardiovascular control and thus the provision of oxygen to exercising muscles and vital organs because of enhanced thermoregulatory demand for skin blood flow coupled with dehydration and hyperthermia. Cardiovascular strain here, typified by reduction in cardiac output, skin and locomotor muscles blood flow, and systemic and muscle oxygen delivery, accompanies marked dehydration and hyperthermia during prolonged and intense exercise are characteristic of many summer Olympic events. Second, the temperature regulation. In general, body core temperatures increase during whole body continuous work and exercise, as we discussed before. That's because energy produced in contracting muscles is used for muscle contraction by about 20%, and the other 80% is converted to heat energy and therefore increases muscle temperature. Both the exercise itself and the air temperature and humidity can increase the core body temperature. To help cooling, the body sends more blood to the circulation through the skin. This leaves less blood for muscles, which in turn increases the heart rate that pushes the body temperature even higher and higher. Here we can say that sweat, which usually cools the body dissipating excessive heat, doesn't evaporate fast in the heat and humidity. As a result, body temperature rises more quickly, which in turn can pose serious threat to the health of the athlete if not properly managed. Third element is altering body fluid balance. Performing exercise, as we discussed before, in a hot environment can place a high demand on evaporative cooling. If fluids are not adequately replaced, then dehydration is most likely to occur, which can challenge the limits of aerobic performance. It's well known that body water deficits greater than just equal or more than 2% of body mass can impair aerobic exercise performance by reducing muscle blood flow and altering skeletal muscle metabolism with a detrimental effects on performance. Dehydration or hypohydration provokes changes in the cardiovascular, thermoregulatory, metabolic, and central nervous function that become increasingly greater as dehydration worsens. If we speak about cognitive effect, a hot environment has been shown to impact the brain, as we discussed before, also with uncomfortable heat, diminishing cognitive abilities, with an increase in the risk of accidents. But definitely, this is related to both complexity of the task and the ability of a person's body to maintain thermoregulation. Performance on simple tasks is relatively unaffected, while complex tasks that require sustained attention are more heavily impacted. At last, we can conclude that football players, athletes, cyclists, and other sport performers can reduce the effects of hot climate by consuming an adequate amount of fluid before, during, and after competition or training to avoid the unpleasant consequences of dehydration. Second, by acclimatization, which can improve the core temperature, improve the sweating quantity and quality, skin temperature, skin blood flow, can improve the fluid balance. As a final conclusion, we can conclude that performing in hot climates can impair performance if the sporting individual is not adequately prepared for the environmental conditions. However, not everyone is negatively affected by the heat, and some people can cope better in hot environments than others. It all comes down to the individual. For example, in a team sport like the World Cup, so having just one player coping badly with the heat can affect the whole team. So even the obvious recommendations like consuming adequate liquids are important to remember to make sure performance is kept optimum for everyone involved. At last, we cannot also turn a blind eye to another truth that warmer weather allows for more effective use of muscles and therefore more effective training, especially in cold areas or cold countries. This is another topic. Finally, thank you very much.